Hello everybody and thanks for joining me. Today I'm tying a lovely George Barron lockfly pattern called the Pretender. The hook I'm using is a Hanak H280 size 10 wet fly hook. It's my preferred one for tying wet flies. And my thread is UTC 70 in black. There's two tails on this fly. The undertail is going to be some dyed red golden pheasant tippets. And then for the overtail, I'm also going to be using golden pheasant, but this time the toppings or crest. And I'm going to use one of the smaller, nicely curved feathers from up at the front of the head. To rib the body, I'm going to use some oval tinsel. This is some Lagertons. You can also use round wire, but I do like the effect that this gives. To dub the body, I'm going to be using some black seal's fur. This is the stuff from Vineyards, works very nicely. And then I'm breaking slightly with the pattern, and I'm going to use claret rather than bright red for the body hackle. That's a nice hen cape from Whiting. The cheeks on this fly are going to be jungle cock. This is a very tired cape, but conveniently, many of the feathers are actually pre-split down the middle, which is exactly what we want for this pattern. Finally, up at the head end and tied quite long, a black hen cape. Again, this is a nice Whiting hen cape, beautiful feathers. So getting started, I've cast on my thread a couple of millimetres back from the hook eye and run it down the length of the body. I'm tying in my undertail here, so a pinch of about 10 to 12 fibres of my golden pheasant tippets. I've left them attached at the base to keep them nicely aligned. Made a couple of wraps over, and I'm just going to draw that through, aiming to have a fairly stubby undertail. I'm going to tie in the overtail slightly longer, and this is just a feather from the toppings. Again, I'm tying it in with the curve pointing upwards, and it's helpfully a very nice straight feather. If these are curved, they can go their own way a little bit, but you can always adjust it, make sure it's sitting nice and centrally on top of the hook shank, and run everything forwards. With the tailing materials secured down, the next material is going to be our rib. With this being a palmered style fly, we will need this in order to secure down the body hackle. I'm tying it in on my side of the hook shank, so that as we come to the end of the body hackle, it's right there and ready to catch in the feather stem. I'm running that down to the base of the tail, parking it out of the way, and now rotating my hook in the vise so I don't stab myself in the finger with the hook point, I'm going to dub on a thin noodle of my seal's fur. I'm aiming to build up a reasonably slender body with enough scraggliness that we can blend it into the body hackle and a little bit of taper working towards the front of the fly. Draw any excess back and out of the way and make a couple of loops just to secure down. Adding a little wax to the thread now, we're ready to tie in our body hackle. And I'm deviating from the recipe slightly. Barron originally calls for bright red, but I do like the look of the claret. I'm tying this in with a cross wrap technique, and then bending the excess stem forwards, making at least 3 turns to secure, draw down the butt, and snip away. This has been a very reliable method of tying in hackles for me. I've never had one come out yet. Work your thread back down to the tie-in point, ready to catch off the wire as we come forwards. And then I am going to use hackle pliers for this one. Normally with these feathers they're long enough that I don't need to, but just to make life a little bit easier for myself since we'll be using most of the length of this feather, I'm going to wrap it at least once, 1 to 1.5 times at the front, and then working in slightly open turns, making sure it's bedded well down into that seal's fur. Work backwards towards the tail of the fly. You can see I'm trying to keep that feather perpendicular at all times, just building up a nice bushy body hackle. This hen is quite a supple material and it does give a lovely action in the water, and I especially like the look of it once it's blended in a little bit with the seal's fur. We've reached the tail of the fly now, and our preparations with that wire have paid off, because it's right there and ready to securely catch in the tip of that feather. I'm using my rotary vise as I work forwards, seesawing the wire backwards and forwards, just to avoid catching down too many of those feather barbs. And now up at the head end, making a couple of really nice tight loops over the top to secure, doubling the wire back on itself, and snipping away. Now we can rough up the body a little bit, pull some of that seal's fur through, blend it into that lovely hackle, and makes a beautiful effect. The next material is going to be our jungle cock eyes, and like I said, I've got one that's already split nicely down the middle here, and I'm making sure to tie it in on the black section of the feather. The yellow and the white are enamelled, whereas the black section is soft and takes much better to thread without splitting or warping. I've tied those in to make some nice bright cheeks on the fly, pointing slightly upwards, not necessarily all the way down the hook shank, just to create a little bit of a body and a bit of a thorax and maybe the impression of some wing buds. Who knows what the trout take these patterns for, but they are very pretty. Finally, up at the head end, I've selected a fairly long black hen cape feather. I'm going to secure that down. You can see we've built up a few extra thread wraps at the front there, ready to make a nice glossy head, especially once varnished. Drawing back that fibre, again this one is long enough that I can get away without using the hackle pliers, but drawing those barbs back towards the tail of the fly, I'm going to make 2 or 3 wraps, go by what looks right, and you can see it's a fairly long feather, but we want it swept back towards the tail of the fly. Again, in the water this has got a lovely suppleness and a lovely mobility to it, makes for a very attractive pattern. That's my 3 wraps done, so I'm going to bring my thread up, catch down the excess, and then I can relax a little bit, let go of the tip, and make sure it's all well secured. Break away the excess, supporting the hook shank with my bobbin, draw back any stragglers, and working from the hook eye backwards, build up a small neat head. Barron recommends this as an early season fly, and apparently it got its name from Bonnie Prince Charlie, also known as the Young Pretender. I say it seems a bit of a tangential reference, but I suspect this fly's resemblance to a clan chief has something to do with it. Either way, building up a neat little head, a couple of whip finishes, and I always like to varnish the heads, both to add a nice glossy finish and also to add some durability by protecting the knot. I like to use a thin natural varnish, but you can also use a UV resin. I just find that the varnish soaks into the thread loops a little bit better. Either way, get a nice glossy finish and a nice hard head. Here's a look at the finished fly. You've got those lovely colours coming through, flashes of red and flashes of yellow, and that picked out seal's fur almost giving a halo-like effect around the fly, and a nice supple hackle at the front. Hope you've enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.